Hey guys, this is part 3 of our neighboring interview with Melanie Radcliffe. In it, she's going to give us some more practical things that we can do and how to reach our neighbors with the gospel. We hope you enjoy.
Um, how can I develop hospitality with my neighbors?
That's a great question. I would say before COVID, I would have answered it a little different.
Yeah, I think COVID changed some things. So maybe we should even look at that as, let's say, post-COVID. Let's say where it's a little bit safer to open our house. Let's just,
Well, I would even say during COVID.
okay, yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah, because my family, we got extremely creative during COVID because to me, this is the time to do neighboring.
Mm,
Especially when we all went into quarantine. That was amazing, an amazing opportunity because you're stuck in your house. You can go in your yard, but you can't see anybody really. And so we actually had so much fun with our neighbors. We played games. We did these socially distanced trivia nights where we'd all stay in our yard and use a loudspeaker that the whole neighborhood heard. We did drive by Easter. So there are front yard bonfires, pizza night where everybody brings their pizza to their front yard and talks. And now, of course, we're all a little more comfortable wearing masks and being in the same yard now that we know a little more about COVID. So don't negate the fact that you can do stuff during COVID. Just don't wait, I say. So hospitality looks different. You're not actually having people in your home and cooking the meal and sitting around watching movies and things. But you can still utilize your home, so to speak, your front porch. You can utilize your cars. It really sky's the limit. But after COVID, I would say once people are a little more comfortable coming into your home, I would say, as you're building relationships, use your home to further that relationship because coffee and in Russia we did tea all
mhm,
the time, but having coffee with someone and a dessert will really open up
mhm,
relationships, but conversations as well. Because the goal is to deepen our conversations. And so hospitality really helps that
right.
because, yes, we are building that relationship and we want to have, you know, common things to talk about and all, but we ultimately would like to deepen that conversation to be able to talk about our faith.
Mhm,
And so, times like this, that's when it happens.
right. Right.
So,
Yeah, and hospitality is such a key principle in the Bible that maybe we don't think about it as much. And there's condemnations for being unhospitable, and there's this calling to be hospitable. If you look at some of the qualifications for pastors, they have to be hospitable. They have to be able
have to
to.
be nice.
Yeah, you have to be nice and be willing to open up your home. And I think even just the principle that the home doesn't really belong to us; it's loaned. You know.
Exactly. When we found our home after being on the mission field and came, when I walked into my house, I said, Lord, this is not our house.
Mhm,
This is your house.
mhm.
And we've seen people get engaged in our house.
Well,
We have everything but death. I don't want to see that.
right. Yes.
So,
Yeah. For sure.
but it's just such an honor. It's
Mhm,
a privilege. And when you gift you say, Lord, this is yours, not mine,
mhm.
then sky's the limit what he'll do.
Right. I think even with that principle of hospitality, um, being on Augusta Highway and there's a large homeless population right around the corner, um, we have to be willing to open our home to people that are really not like us, um, and that comes with and even expose our children, to people who are not like us. And there's a little bit of that fear of threat that I think we need to be a little bit more brave on. And again, I'm preaching to the choir myself. I mean, it's very easy to say this. I'm just saying, it's very easy to say this, hard to do. But there seems to be a place where, in some of the parables of Jesus, where we're not just supposed to invite the people that can invite us back, and to invite the people, especially invite the people that cannot invite us back. That seems to be the it's not wrong, Jesus says, to invite people that can invite you. That's not and can repay you with greetings and hospitality, but it's especially Christian to invite people who cannot. And I think that's a principle of hospitality, along with some of the other things that is hard, but is necessary if we're going to reach people with the gospel. I think about the idea of our church being in the community and the direct neighbors around us, who is walking up and down the street in front of, who living around us. Those are the people our church should be reaching out to specifically. And I certainly with your home church, same kind of thing. This neighborhood is key. So, anyways, let me ask another question. How does prayer help with neighboring? We mentioned that a little bit earlier. How do you think that it actually helps?
So, specifically, when you are, let's take those 3 names that you circled on your 3, 2, 1, go card. When you begin to intentionally pray for those people, not only are your prayers being lifted up to the Lord, but you also become more aware and more sensitive and more compassionate towards those people. You might start actively texting them and asking them, or calling them and asking them, how are they doing, and things like that. Some people have been on my list that they were in my sphere, but they were more on the outskirts of my sphere. So it brought them to the forefront because I was praying for them. And so prayer, God uses prayer in our lives to not just change that person that we're praying for, but also to change us. And I think that the person, the recipient of the prayers, they know it. Like, you can tell them, I'm praying for you. How can I pray for you? I think it impacts them and affects them and softens their heart for the gospel as well.
That's good. That's good. I have friends. You may not be able to read this one on here. It's long. I have friends who are not Christians. We talk about all kinds of things. How do I change the conversation to spiritual things? So it's easy for me to talk to my friends about my work. It's easy to talk about what's going on in the news, sports, even just what's going on with our children, life, school, all those kind of things. How do I go from, and I don't have a problem talking to them about that. How do I go from that to a conversation about Jesus?
So this is the $1 million question that everybody has.
Without being super awkward,
Yeah,
because it's like, hey, you have those things. Well, I saw one time where it's like, a sports analogy where you try to say, hey, you like football. Well, Tim Tebow played football and he's a Christian. Do you know who Jesus is? So without being super awkward, and people are like, how did we get from, but begin those bridges, or just kind of, how do we change the tenor of the conversation to spiritual things?
There is a key. Like I said, this is the key question everybody asks. So to me, there is a point in the conversation where you can deepen the conversation by being vulnerable. That's the key. So that's going to take something from you. And what that takes is a little bit of your pride. Meaning, are you going to share a piece of your life, a difficult trial, a sin that you've struggled with in the past and God helped you overcome it, something you're struggling with currently? If you are vulnerable, then they will feel safe to be vulnerable back. And so in the conversation, there's a shift in tone and tenor, like you said, because there's a shift in your posture. And that makes a big difference.
I think that's powerful right there. That's, and that may be very intimidating for you. And again, I think you go back to prayer with that. Lord, help me to be vulnerable with this person. because again, that can always come back to haunt you in some way. But typically though, it doesn't. Typically,
No,
people,
again, you're building
right?
relationship, and
Hmm.
so these are people you see all the time.
Hmm.
So when I share a piece of my life that I don't just like put on social media,
Right.
um, that enables them to share a piece of their life.
Right.
Or if I see that they're willing to just share, um, then it makes them feel more comfortable and makes them go even deeper when you share too.
Right.
So even if you're not the first to share, and I'm not talking about like, you just throw up and lay it all out there. It
Right.
has to fit the situation.
Hmm.
But the beauty of it is when you share of a struggle that you've had and you've overcome, then this piece fits perfectly.
Right.
Because obviously, as believers, we didn't overcome those by ourselves, did we?
Mhm.
The Holy Spirit and our faith in Jesus is what helped us overcome.
And maybe God is giving us painful things. Some of us may be going through painful things right now or struggles, um, for that very purpose. That as He takes us through those things, we have an opportunity to be vulnerable with people. So if you think about it, maybe pain has a greater purpose than what we see. So, um, what is the posture I should take when dealing with my neighbors?
We talk about servant leadership a lot in my work. So servant posture, not thinking that you're better than them, not judging them, not, thinking, well, I would never do this. First of all, if you ever say that, you probably will struggle with that in the future. That's what I have found in my many years of being a believer. But yeah, so just being willing to sacrifice for that relationship, time, money, energy, um, all of that. I think our family has willingly and like with Thanksgiving, like we have joyfully given, sacrificed all of those things. We genuinely love our neighbors, like physical neighbors in our work, all of the sphere. So I think it's a mind posture too. It's not just like a physical posture, it's your mindset. Where are you? How do you view your neighbors? The ones who are partying till 3 a.m., getting drunk or whatever. Like, are you across the street looking at them from the window, judging them and saying, I'm glad that's not my kid or whatever? That's not the right posture, right? And also, I look at Jesus when I think of posture. Who did Jesus hang out with? Of course, he taught his disciples through living with them and being with them, but he also spent time with sinners. And, I want to rub off, you know, like Jesus on people who are lost. And I can't do that if I'm across the street judging them.
Right. That's key. Yeah.
I have to actually spend time with them and, live, do life with them. And
Hmm.
it's a privilege, it's an honor.
It is. It is. And
But
and Jesus got accused by the religious Pharisees of being a glutton and a drunkard. You know, because seemed to be hanging out with those people a little too much for their comfort.
Mhm.
So that seems to be he stepped in to these homes, stepped into these positions, wasn't scared of it, and served and cared about the person. You
Mhm.
know, and I think that's key. That's very important. How does listening help with neighboring?
Well, listening is another key because when you're not talking, you're listening. And so it's important to make sure that we're doing a lot less talking so that we can listen and hear. A person who doesn't feel heard will continue to repeat and talk and about things because they don't feel like you're really listening. There's a great like a practice I like to do when I'm talking to groups. I like them to partner up. So if you can pause this after I explain it, but if you can get a partner, you can practice listening. Meaning, for a minute, I want you to talk to your partner about something that you're dealing with right now. And that partner cannot talk. They can only listen. So one partner's talking and one partner's listening. And then you're going to switch. And you're going to be surprised at how difficult that is because in our culture, we're so used to bantering.
Mm-hmm.
And that bantering, though, misleads the conversation because we don't ever stay on topic. You know, we might be talking about my neighbor and I'll say, and they have this dog named Bo. And you'll go, oh, I have a dog named Bo. And then it'll go off the tracks. And so that's why listening is important because we can truly hear what they're trying to say. You also listen with your eyes, which is hard on Zoom if you're ever having a conversation, but
Right.
but you listen with your eyes, meaning you're watching their body language, how comfortable they are. If they're closed off, you can see things like that, you know, like if they're just angry, which some people might be listening to me talk right now, feeling that way. I don't like what she's saying. But yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I think it's key. Like you said, many times we are not listening, even though we might be quiet. We are just waiting for our opportunity to respond. And I think even with that, you'd mentioned, asking questions, letting them speak and just asking further questions on that, getting them sometimes even just to define terms. So we might have a common word, but we mean two different things.
That's true. Yeah.
So if I say the word conservative, well, in a political realm, you think of the Republican Party. If you think of, but if I'm sitting in a seminary class and I say conservative, I may not be thinking about politics at all. I may be thinking about the Baptist conservative resurgence in the '80s and all kinds of different things that could come up with that. So sometimes we use a word in context, and so sometimes we have to remember that I might be filtering that in. I'm encoding it into some kind of way, and there are always filters in with those words. And so we need to remember that and sometimes ask terms. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and listening leads to those questions, those good questions to
Right.
ask them. That's a great point, definitely.
Right. Yeah, because if you say the word Jesus, there are all kinds of things that come up. Or Christian, it can be a positive or a negative thing to some people. So, what are some resources? I think this is our last question. What are some resources to help with neighboring?
Well, I mentioned Bless Every Home
Right.
and the 3 circles, and then the Art of Neighboring, and then there's one more book which, when it comes to the listening, asking good questions, and all of that, this is an excellent resource. It's called The 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversations by Shaler and Crilly. I've met Mary Shaler before. She's a wonderful person. She is on the board at Wheaton College right now. But the Q Place is the website, and I think you can find that on the back. But they have workbooks that you can work through with your community groups that I recommend. I have one at the office I can show you if you'd like.
Great.
But there's I think 9 chapters, but they're all just so specific, and they have some great practical tips and some challenges and things like that. But these are 2, the Art of Neighboring and then the Spiritual Conversations book. Excellent tools. This one will help you dig deeper into how to go from that kind of shallow conversation to the spiritual conversation. This one will help a lot. So
yeah, and I would recommend Rosaria Butterfield, whether it's articles. She's done a few conferences where you can find on YouTube. So if you're not, you don't want to grab a book, you can grab a YouTube video. She has 2 books that kind of work together in some ways. One's the smaller version, The Secret Thoughts of an Unlikely Convert, which is her conversion story, which is an amazing thing, and it is an amazing example of neighboring somebody that is not like you. Her story is great, and you can find her testimony online as well. And then the gospel comes with a house key, and how the gospel and neighboring go together are key books. But she's written articles and for different Christian sites and done interviews, and it's just a good source and really puts this into practice in real life. I know reading her book that she has people over her house 6 days a week.
Wow.
And I'm
That's
thinking,
good.
like, how in the world?
That's good.
Now again, not everybody's going to do that, and we're
Yeah.
not saying that's the goal, but it's very possible. She just makes this very intentional with her neighbors and makes that puts these things into practice, and gives you in those books not only practical steps that she does, but she gives stories of how this has worked and changed lives. So. And not always the way we expect, and not always the people we expect.
That's true.
So I think that is the last of our questions.
Okay.
Did you have anything else you want to say before we get done?
I just want to encourage your people to not wait.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can definitely see where the scare of COVID and all, which is really you need to be safe, can prevent you from going forward and loving your neighbors now. But I want to encourage you not to wait. Take I've taken Krispy Kreme donuts to my neighbors during the season when one family actually had COVID, and then one had a birth of a baby. So and that's another thing is some of the most the best times to neighbor is when there's a birth of a baby or a death in the family,
Right.
or loss of some sort, like a job or something like that. So
That's right.
again, pay attention, take notes, and just look for opportunities, because I know that if you're praying for them to come, God will give them to you.
Yep. And God's gracious in that, and I'm thankful for this conversation, and looking forward to you coming back in some kind of way, whether it's in small groups or something like that, when we get past some of this online only stuff. And thankful for all you've done. We just pray, and then we'll turn this off, and we'll be done. Lord, we pray that you would give us grace, that we would be able to see our neighbors in the way that you see them, as people that need the gospel of Christ, and to see that your sovereign hand has put us in a neighborhood or workplace or school, or with friends and family that do not know you. And we may be the only person that they know that's a believer. And you've called us to be their friend, to neighbor with them, to care about them, to pray for them, to share the gospel with them. Lord, I just pray that you would give us eyes to see that the fields are ripe and ready for harvest, that you would give us a sense of being intentional in everything that you're calling us to do, and that you would just give us success, that you would bless our efforts, that we may fumble at this and not know exactly what to say, but you're not looking for excellence, Lord, or perfection in us. You're looking for faithfulness. You are already excellent. You are already perfect enough. Help us to be faithful to you and faithful to care about people. Help us to be about your glory and the good of others. We thank you that you have put us here for this purpose, for this mission. Help us to be about it. Help us to be about that more than anything else that is in our life. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for watching this portion of the interview with Melanie Radcliffe. Very thankful for her and all that she's done. Please join in for the other two sections, as they can be really helpful in understanding what it means to reach our neighbors with the gospel.